It looked like episode 6 acted like a season premiere.
I've been pushing this agenda for weeks.
I think you're right. I think you got it.
That felt like a season 2 premiere, right? With the voiceover from Nancy at the start, which I thought was very clever that it turned in that she was actually saying that out loud while she was doing her community service.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Because I remember at the end of the last episode, she was like, did you hear that? And we were like, oh, she's talking to us. Who was she talking to then?
I think they were trying different things because that whole thing drops by episode 7. I think they were trying to see whether or not they wanted her to look at the camera at us, and they're like, it's weird.
It very much had a like, shh, did you hear that? Kind of like ghost story element about it. But then the show kind of does what every show on the CW does that has voiceover. By the 3rd episode, it's gone. Nancy's kind of kept the voiceover throughout, but it's been very sporadic. Whereas now it seems like they've come up with the idea of having her actually talk to herself while she's doing her community service, which was quite clever. But the fact that she told us where all of the characters were, that they were all doing different things. And then when the mystery started, there was a very let's get the band back together vibe about it. It screamed season premiere to me. So I feel like this is where season 2 was officially supposed to start.
It was funny though because it only really been 2 weeks, but they kind of felt like it had been like a whole summer between.
Yeah, it's always a summer.
But like it was a whole get the band back together sort of vibe. You're right, and it's interesting that we seem to have left our anger about the Agleka in the previous episode, and we've moved on to I found a sense of purpose. I found a sense of we actually should be doing this.
I know. I was like Ace. I mean, he's so me. Like, I can't stay committed to one emotion for too long. So I was like, that worked for me. I was taken aback. I was like, weren't we just mad at Nancy? And then I guess shared trauma of George almost dying. They were all like, okay, we're better. We're fine. Past is the past.
True. Plus, I guess 14 episodes of box lunches, not 14 episodes, 14 weeks of box, not 14 weeks. I can't do words. 14 days of like box lunches from his mom. And he's like, I need to do more than just
cute. Yeah. We haven't met his mom yet, right?
Not yet.
No. I need to meet this woman.
I feel like that was another season 2 tease. Like, they always plant the seeds for when things like that come up. So I feel like we will learn more about his family this season. And I hope we do, because there's so much untold when it comes to him.
Yeah, and these 2 episodes didn't give us much about that. The supernatural haunting of the week was interesting, though. I cannot believe. Well, I can believe that Nancy would open the bag to look in and pull the bugs out of the man's mouth, but it shook me when he fell out of her at home.
Oh, jump scare.
I know.
It got me.
And she was intrigued by it, and I was like, no, girl, I would need to go lie down.
Yeah, totally.
To my dad.
Let's perform an autopsy in my dining room. No, don't do that.
And I loved how like Nick was back on his dad energy. It was like, can we all think about this? And they were all already like not ignoring him. Yeah. Ace had the gloves on, the apron, and Bess was not even entertaining any of Nick's like caution.
She's like pizza cutter.
Yeah, the energy was like, I loved seeing them have fun together again and like be playful and to kind of change the energy. And I did think, speaking of Ace, I can't remember if I talked about it in the last 2 episodes, but to see him be a little bit more confident in himself and within the group, to be a little bit more playful than his little sarcastic mumblings in the background. I just think his growth as a character that's been steady and like kind of quiet, like it's not hitting us over the face. He's just getting more and more confident to, or maybe comfortable is the thing. Cause he's such I'm assuming like a loner. So to see him actually like having a nice friendship with Nick, and like he always has his connection with Bess, but he seems like he's not just the dishwasher anymore. He's part of the gang, and he feels that.
And he's always wanted that. It's you reminded me of that when he was mad at Nancy, and he was like, it feels like this is being taken from me, and that's why he's like he couldn't deal in that moment, and it wasn't taken from him, and now he gets to have a lot of fun solving mysteries with his friends, and they each bring something different to the table. It was funny seeing them have this little pocket investigative thing going on in the kitchen while Nick is like not having it. And George is taking pictures of her sister, can tell her what the bug is. And Bess is like ready with the tools. And Ace has his gloves on. He's about to get to it. We're going to cut through this poorly sewn together man's back. And we're going to find out like everything that's inside. This show makes all the supernatural things. It can be spooky, but when those five are together, did I count right? We're just gonna assume I did. There's a bunch of levity to it, but it does have its seriousness. Like when they found out that the Theron, the supernatural thing, goes after children. That was a lot.
Yeah, there's always a big tragic background to a lot of these stories.
And I referenced The Walking Dead a lot in this podcast, but my goodness, was that scene terrifying when the body woke up in the back of the van and it went for the child. I feel like the show jump scares never fails, and I think that was one of the most terrifying yet, even though we kind of knew it was coming when it sat up in the background and everything. But like, and the way it was shot, the way you were like, you saw the it stop, and then Nancy was following and with Nick in the car. Yeah, my goodness, you could feel the tension rising as they build towards that, even though you knew what was happening. And I just thought that was such a like powerful moment, because this show does jump scares, this show does terrifying moments so well, but even when you know it's coming, it still makes you incredibly uneasy. And maybe that's the shift in tone now for season 2. I feel like we're going to get that a lot more as we get this like monster of the week theme, because whatever Nancy did in that room when she took the shawl to save George, there's a lot of monsters out there now. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they experiment with that, those tropes and the supernatural going forward.
No, I like there was consequences to it. I mean, we knew there would be, but they they gave them 2 weeks to have a break before things started breaking loose. But I do like that there's this tension now between her and, is her name Hannah? The woman at the Historical Society. But like that, you also need Nancy, because yes, she made the mess, but she can fix it, not to mention who else is going to fix it in town. And I like the element of with the circling back to the child, that you should listen to children when they say that they heard something. I mean, yes, his dad didn't want to indulge him, though he should have just indulged a child when they say
right.
But like to find out that was actually an element of the whole story, and that Charles was protecting him, and then seeing those child hands pull that thing back into the ground from which it came was a lot.
Didn't love that it was George's sisters. I know they needed some like they needed emotional stakes. They needed it to be like a big heightened thing, but George, man, can't catch a break coming or going.
She cannot at all. Do you like how slow this reveal with Odette has been? Or did you wish that we sort of gotten there in episode 6 more?
I don't know. Michael, what do you think?
I'm on both sides about it, because we kind of saw it coming from the finale for episode 5, and then had to wait a little while for it, but we knew it was coming. And then in the first episode, or episode 6, nothing happened. I mean, a lot happened with George, but there was no revelation. And then, well, we'll get to the next episode shortly, but I feel like the revelation played out fine, because they didn't make us wait too long, and there was a storyline to kind of force it. I know sometimes that can be iffy, but I feel like in this situation, it kind of worked well. There's been you want George to be open with people, but at the same time, you understand why she's struggling with it, because it's very much a thing. She takes things on and wants to solve the problems herself. That was very much in character. And it was also very much in character for Nick to be worried about her, because she's not talking to him. And he knows, he said that himself, George is not a person that needs saving. She can very much look after herself. But this is one of those situations where the lines blurred, and she does kind of need help saving herself, not to take all the credit away from her, but like Nancy knows about the stuff, Nick knows about the stuff, Ace and Bess also know about the stuff. So I'm glad we eventually worked to a place where it is teamwork, but I was completely at home with the fact that she was trying to take it on herself at the beginning.
I'm of two minds. Like, it's very in character for George to do that, but I also felt like by the time it's episode 7, it escalated in a way that didn't mesh with episode 6. Because she was still in episode 6, she's still very much just singing in French.
Yeah. It was like more of what we had already known from episode 5, that she like knows French, or that's in the mirror, and we just like found out the the rules in episode 6, and then it just like
Mhm.
went full speed ahead in 7.
Yeah, and that I didn't quite. I wish we had just gotten a little bit more in episode 6. Um, it's weird watching things back to back, like literally, because I feel like the opinion would shift if there was a week break between the two. I don't know. But last point for episode 6, Carson and Nancy are working together now.
This reminded me so much of Veronica Mars, which I hate comparing Nancy Drew, this show Nancy Drew, to Veronica Mars, because Veronica Mars was, I mean, had to have been inspired by Nancy Drew. But this was giving me Veronica and Keith, and Veronica was always the teen that was getting up to no good, doing her investigations, and Keith was the dad trying to keep her in line. And it seems like we're gonna get that. Although Carson was like, has no money, and he's like, I can pay you. And I'm like, with what money, Carson?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that part was strange. I mean, they are very cute together though. I was like, this doesn't seem like she saw the past due notices, sir. Like, I don't know. And lunch is included too. Like, he's gonna provide her lunch, which I mean, that's a total dad thing, but like, I don't know where the funds are coming from. Are there more cases lined up?
Was 6 the episode where she calls him dad?
Yes.
Yes.
Because there was a moment where they're like bantering and she says dad, and I thought they were going to make a moment of it, or Carson was going to be like, oh my god, you called me dad. But I loved that moment, to see Nancy fully opened up again to her dad,
Mhm.
her non-Ryan dad.
Yeah, and I kind of was expecting that moment too, because earlier in the episode, when he walked in, when she had the client and was talking to the woman who found the body under the tray, she literally said Carson. So they made a big moment of the fact that she called him that. So I thought there would be a moment later on, but this show is absolutely brilliant as far as subtleties go. Maybe it was supposed to be more subtle, and it's cute seeing them work their way back to each other. They're in a different place now, but it's every bit as fulfilling seeing them get back to where they were. And I can't wait to see how they work together. And I feel like that's a good segue into the next episode, because we kind of got the beginnings of that in episode 7.
We did, and it was sweet. Though, just to say, she said Carson because she lied to that woman about being his staff member, so she couldn't call him
Okay.
dad.
Okay, that makes sense. Damn, Nancy Drew confusing us.
But the them working together, I love that they popped her bubble early on, that this was not going to be some type of I'm
Yeah, you're
sending
not
you
going
around
to be in the
town.
field.
Yeah, he's like, here are the bills and the receipts, like for the couple that are getting divorced. He's like, and I have a 2-hole punch. Like, have fun.
She would definitely find something in that, though.
Mm-hmm.
She would.
Yeah, it very much gave the idea that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And then we didn't get to see more of it. I know it was more about what and how Nancy felt about college, but I kind of felt like Carson was going to be like, are you working on my case, or what is it that you've got drawn into here? And because she obviously had her hands full for the rest of the episode. But it was a nice continuation from what came before, because they're happy to be working together, but meanwhile, Carson's not going to stop being her father and suggesting whether she wants to go to college or not. I feel like that played a great deal of importance into Nancy's story then in this episode, as did the case she had to investigate.
And he was like, if you want to go to Columbia, we can make that happen. And I'm like, Carson, we've seen your books.
It's like, she's gonna need the scholarship page, the financial aid, or to
if
talk to
anybody's gonna make it
Ryan.
happen, it's Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think also this episode sort of set up the idea of a possible paranormal investigator situation for Nancy, since those 3 girls came directly to her, and that was really cool. It also did this nice dichotomy of like, yes, they're all around the same age, but she is not like these college girls, and neither are the rest of her friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were very much younger.
Yeah.
In essence.
I thought it was some of the comedy in this episode was very, very good. With the fact that Ace texted Nick SOS because he was trapped in the house with these 3 college girls, who were very much acting like college girls. And then Nick didn't really get it at first, and then later on he was like, "No, don't you dare leave me! Don't you dare leave me!" Again, I think that's just down to the great the way the show tackles dynamics. We've seen Nick and Ace have scenes before, but I feel like we kind of saw some important moments between Nick and Ace in this episode. In the episode beforehand, we saw that incredible scene with Ace and George in the car, where they kind of bonded over coming back from the dead. Mm-hmm. And then even Bess and Nick had a unique dynamic where they were both worried about George. It's only now I'm starting to realize we didn't see as many sides of the group or as many like one-on-one dynamics within the group as you think. And I feel like a season 2 started, we're starting to see a lot more of that. And whether it's comedy or whether it's seriousness, it all really adds just to building that friendship that they've kind of really concocted among themselves.
And you can really feel the friendship too, between all of the characters. It did take that first season for everyone to get used to the dynamics and how they've changed over time. I just feel like they've cemented now into who they are to each other. Like, yeah, they're learning more about one another, but they feel very settled as a friend group now, with everybody respecting what everybody else brings to the table, but also having fun moments together. And there isn't currently, we're only 2 episodes into this next part of the season, there's no drama.
No, not yet.
But I guess there might be with the George situation.
Yeah.
I don't understand how she thinks that she's going to be able to keep this from Nick for long, considering the fact that Odette is taking over her body now. Like, at some point, she's going to do it in front of Nick.
And the fact that more people know now, Ace doesn't know yet, does he? He wasn't involved in any of the scenes where they found out. So Nancy and Bess, it feels like the group's kind of divided here, and that they know more things than some of the other half does. And I wonder if that'll play into the conflict, or whether
Nick's going to be so angry at everybody for lying.
Yeah, right.
We like priorities, Nick.
Well, the one thing, so I have one fear. And it's because of something that Ace said in episode 6 about how George isn't Nancy. I was like, this does not need to be like a trauma response from Nick. Like, this is a whole different situation. Like, there's a reason why she's hiding this from you. It's not like Nancy. I don't want them to do as much something that you said, Reed, is that every time there's a problem with Fanson, we then circle it back to what a problem was with Drusen. Like, I get that that's natural, that would happen realistically, but also this is fiction and they can't keep doing that. It makes it seem like, to me, it would make it read like Fanson has to be have a read on Drusen, and that they communicate with each other as far as like relationship texts go, and that's not necessary. They can just exist on their own, cut the cord.
They don't need to keep bringing it up for us. Like, we know, we've watched, and now this is its own thing. Yeah, you're right. I didn't really pick up on that scene.
And not to shade Nancy, but I feel like there's a stark contrast between what's happening here, in that Nancy sometimes was completely unaware of how Nick felt, or didn't take his feelings into regard whenever she kept things from him, or soldiered on and did her own thing. Whereas George just made the decision not to tell Nick because of how he feels. You know, with that conversation she had with Bess at the end was quite poignant, where she said about how he still wakes up at night calling out, and he's still afraid that he's still traumatized by the fact that he temporarily lost her. So she doesn't want to add to his stress. So I do think while on the surface these situations might look similar, they're very, very different. So the comparison should not be made.
Yeah, please don't do that. I have a feeling that it's going to happen, but I prefer it not be a big thing. Hopefully not. Okay,
speaking of relationships, can we talk about Ace, please?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Flirting.
It came out of nowhere. Didn't realize that had he even spoken to, is her name Amanda?
I had to Google her because I forgot who she was. Sorry, Amanda.
Yeah, like, she's one of the bops. I thought Gil would come back and that'd be a new thing for Nancy, because they clearly had a flirtation going on, which made sense. But not to say that Ace and Amanda can't be lovely. I was just, oh, well, have you been harboring a crush? That was the energy. The energy was that he had been harboring a crush, but it didn't seem like they had communicated before then. So I was like, okay.
And Nancy kind of picks up on it too.
She did.
She lets him have his little moment, and then she's like, okay. And she reels him, and she's like, hey, let's go.
Like, time is sensitive. There's a ghost thing happening.
It was interesting that it was Nancy that did that, because I feel like we've talked about how them two have quite a unique bond. And I know people could read into it like, was Nancy jealous or whatever. I don't think we're at that stage yet. I feel like they have such like unique camaraderie that they kind of like read each other in the way that nobody else can. And like, for example, I love the fact that they both have their own private server, and that there was a conversation made about that later on. But I feel like, yeah, you're right. She gave him his few moments, and then when it started like impinging on the investigation, she was like, gotta go, get out of here. But it was kind of adorable watching him try to flirt with her, but at the same time know he was under the pressure, as in, we got to get this information and get out of here.
Yeah, but she also Nancy circles back, and she gives him the opportunity to then spend more time with Amanda. I mean, yes, it benefits her, but it just seems interesting that She would call Ace, but I just like how it fits in the story. That like, okay, I interrupted your time together. You can go back, but do a job for me at the same time.
She knew she could make use of that.
Yes.
What do we think about Odette?
I want her to heal and move on. Like I just like not that I don't like her. I do. I just feel like I might have liked her character if either she was possessing somebody else or if there was another situation going on besides yet another possession for George.
Mm-hmm. That I'm glad they made reference to the fact that George has been possessed before, because this does have an issue that it could come off as quite samey, as in being there, done that. Let George breathe for a second. But at the same time, this episode was more important as far as Odette goes, because we see that Odette actually did something nice, and she may not be the malevolent spirit she's been cracked up to be, but you're also like, but then you have that ending scene where she's like, the only way to get me out of George's body is to kill the host. And I'm like, oh, so we don't know what Odette's motivations are yet.
I feel like we know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, I mean, I love the stakes, but I'm like, I know how this goes.
She is very dramatic, though. The whole, I took her to the hounds and now she's gone. I'm like, okay, Odette, we could have phrased that better.
Leah's French accent, though.
Amazing.
Loved it. I loved it.
Speaking of accents, though, there were accents in episode 6 to Nick did one.
Love it. Amazing.
Like the writers are like, so how many of y'all can do accents? Because we're gonna do the thing. We need you.
Before we move on to the big cliffhanger and wrap things up there, I do want to touch on a scene that I really liked quickly, which was the scene between Nancy and Jennifer at the bus station.
The bus station scene.
Where Jennifer admits like how she felt, why she felt she needed to escape, but she just feels so like out of place in college, or I guess more specifically the volleyball team. And Nancy kind of explains what she's gone through. I kind of wanted the scene to go a little bit further when Jennifer was like, why did you let me go on so much about my minor existential crisis? I wanted to be like, no, your feelings are vital. Anything you feel is vital. And I do think Nancy expresses that. Just the way that she shared her experience with that girl that she does not know felt very empathic and not like, well, look what I went through. It's nothing compared to your volleyball hazing. I thought it was very sweet. I did just kind of want to go a little bit further to like, but again, like Michael said, this show has a very good subtle writing quality where like we can pick up on that. I just hope that viewers did pick up on that. And I don't want anyone to think that just because you might have anxiety over certain changes, or like if you're going to college and you feel out of place, like that's a thing. That's okay to feel that way. And you don't have to go through all the things that Nancy felt to feel the way both of them did.
Yeah, I think Kennedy did her best though without having a line, because her face says it, even if she has no words for it. It is a great, very vulnerable scene where Nancy gives up a piece of herself in order to connect with somebody else, which is not to say that Nancy doesn't do that, but to do that with a stranger when she had been struggling in the previous season, to even share that with people that she actually knows, was also a point of growth for her. And she had an outsider tell her, like someone who's not in her bubble, tell her, you keep talking about college, I think that means you want to go.
There's a really powerful way to bring like the kind of like the college thing came up. Obviously, we mentioned with the Carson scene, and then you were like, is there a reason for this? And of course, the episode gave you the reason, but I feel like that was a nice way of pulling it all together. And speaking of pulling it all together, Ryan and Nick are obsessed with keeping Nancy's name away from the Hudsons. And then you saw that moment where she wasn't sure what surname she wanted to put in on her application.
I was like, Nancy, your government name is Nancy Drew.
Right.
Yes.
I know you have an identity crisis right now, but you know you're going to put Drew on there. Like, please.
Well, she has no connection to the Hudson name. I don't know, like, besides, of course, Ryan, but what I mean is, like, why are we pretending there's emotional weight there for her? There's not. The emotional weight was with Ryan, the person, not his last name.
I know it went from like, oh, what should I do with the rest of my life to like, okay, I made the decision to maybe apply to college, but now it's like, who am I? And maybe we're going to get more of that in the future episodes, but it didn't feel like Nancy ever struggled with her name. Like, I don't think she's going to be Nancy Drew -Hudson or change her name to Hudson. I just don't see that. And she can't. because of Everett's gonna kill her or whatever they were talking about. Not to laugh about that.
It's more so that like it's more of a mess because I don't know why Ryan thought it'd be okay to call the man's manager, the financial manager, and that not get back to Everett. That was like he was doing so well until he tripped.
And then he had to do the damage control and take the job to cover his tracks. I do feel like Nancy's crisis about who she is very much could play into the plot. I don't think, I would like to think she's not going to put Hudson down on her application if she does apply, but it was some nice tension to end the episode with because everybody around her is keeping a secret that we all thought she would have no problem keeping. And now we're starting to say, hold on a minute, does she want to have this conversation? Does she want to add herself as a Hudson? And yeah, I feel like it feels like another new season 2 thread. And I'm wondering where it'll go, especially with all the like stakes that were added to it in this episode as far as Everett goes.
Speaking of, let's talk about the husband.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
That
came out of nowhere.
Did not access it. Says her husband. Okay, that was not part of the backstory that she gave Nancy at the funeral. And she is not given that. I wonder if Elizabeth knows, or if season 2 even cares about Elizabeth at this point. But I do want to know.
I was waiting for the camera to like pan on this man, and I guess we don't know who he is, because I guess Ace didn't look at him, so we didn't get to see him. But we did see Bess's picture on his phone. I just hope this isn't like a. I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say if it's a picture, that picture looked recent. It looked like the outfit she wore at one of the not Hudson events, the Marvin events.
Oh, maybe.
So was he watching her, or was that just a convenient promo photo he happened to have on his phone?
I just hope it's not like some like abusive thing where she ran away from him. Like I don't want it to be something like that, but it's gonna get juicy. What is Ace gonna do with this info?
I know. He's her protector.
Go to Bess. Don't go to anybody else first.
That, or he might hack first. He might hack and bring her information that he found. I violated your privacy, but apparently your husband is here.
He would so say that.
Okay. Last Nancy Drew thoughts besides Bess's husband. Was that it?
I think so.
Okay.
I like season 2. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
I do too. I like the energy of these 2 episodes. I think we needed a little bit of a story of the week, and starting episode 7 with characters we never met before was an exciting, like we don't get that a lot in the show, and it's a touchstone of like procedurals where you start with a character you don't know and you work your way to your heroes helping them. I don't want every episode to be like this, but it's a nice like once in a while little breather.
That's true.